10 vital steps to thriving during difficult times. I rolled some of this out last week, but I want to do a quick recap and show you guys how you can get this. There's a lot of new faces on here tonight, and I'm going to run through this very quickly. Step one, if you want this, go to 10stepstothrive.com and you can download it. Step one is our Survive and Thrive Guide. We released this at the outset of this COVID-19 crisis. This is going to tell you all about the base level stuff you need to do to get your expenses and your overhead quickly in order. Student loans that can be deferred, utilities, mortgages, all the baseline stuff that came out early on. Step two, cash is oxygen. You can go 2 or 3 minutes without oxygen, and it's the same with cash. When you run out of cash, you run out of business. You have to understand if you're in a situation of cash burn right now. I don't care if it's your money, if it's your wife's money, your Uncle Eddie's money, or the government's PPP money. If you're burning cash, you need to know how long that's going to last for. This is a cash burn calculator that you can go plug your numbers into. It's at 10stepstothrive.com. We're giving all this. It's all packaged up. You can download it, edit it, do all the stuff to get all of your numbers in here so you can understand, what if this thing does go 3 months longer? What if pent-up demand doesn't exist? What if it does? Great, let's hope for a better case scenario, and then we end up ahead. But if you don't prepare for it and you run out of cash, your practice is done. And if you're in that kind of situation and you don't have enough money on the sidelines that you can inject, or maybe your cash burn is going to overshoot the cash on the sidelines that you have, you've got to understand all of your assumptions. And in a couple hours, you can have this cash burn calculator figured out. And remember that perfection is the enemy of progress. This cash burn calculator, most of our practices, they're changing it every week based on income they get, or expenses that change, or timelines that change. This thing is never perfect. It's never done. It's evolving. It's a forecast. You're always looking 13 weeks into the future. So perfection is the enemy of progress with this thing. That you just got to get started. The first step is just getting started and plug your numbers in. Plug them in and look at what it looks like. If you don't like how it looks, and it's got a little visual trend line that'll show you, where's my cash going? Is it going up or is it going down? If it's going down and you don't like that, now you can go in and you can say, oh gosh, you know, maybe I need to produce another 10,000 this month in emergencies. That rights my ship. Okay, great. Now, how am I going to do that? Where am I going to go? Now, you know, if I need 10,000 more bucks in production, okay, now let's go figure out how to make that happen. The spreadsheet doesn't give you the answers. It only gives you the direction you need to march. SBA loan strategy update, right? I've been talking about this every week. I think there's a major CPA firm that's advising doctors not to get the PPP. And I've said it now for a couple weeks in a row. I think that's galactically stupid. I think a 1% interest loan for 2 years is a gift. And even if you don't use it, if you want to park some cash on the sidelines as a safety net, I think everybody should go get the PPP, even if there was no forgiveness. If you get $100,000 on the PPP, it costs you 1% for 2 years. It costs you $2,000 to have another $100,000 cash cushion. I think that's really smart. And if you do get forgiveness, which you likely will get some portion of it forgiven, you know, the forgiveness ends June 30th, which means May 1st would be the beginning of the 8-week period preceding June 30th. So I think everybody ought to be applying, especially this thing just got refunded. They just put another $480 billion into the economy today, $320 billion of it. They refunded the PPP, and they're setting aside another $60 billion for small lenders and community financial institutions. They've also refunded $60 billion for the EIDL loans, $25 billion for testing, $75 billion for hospitals. I mean, they're throwing money around this thing. It's just raining money out of DC right now. And All this runs out June 30th, the forgivability portion. So my advice, I'm not a CPA and I'm not an attorney. This is what I think from my business point of view. Everybody should get the PPP on or after May 1st, run the 8 weeks, spend what you can, do it smartly, and then you got a cash cushion. Return the money if you don't want it at that point. Worst case is it becomes a working capital line of credit, so to speak, at 1% interest. Best case, you get partial or full forgiveness, and depending on your state and when you reopen, this is a huge cash infusion to help get you going. So I don't think there's a bad way to go with this PPP. The only bad thing is you spend the money and then it turns into a loan that you have to pay back. Well, make sure whatever money you spend wisely. If you still have your whole team on board and you're burning through the PPP at a full rate just to keep them on the payroll, maybe you reconsider that trajectory and think about it and consider other options. There's other ways to do it. Rent and mortgage deferment. This was a letter we wrote for one of our clients, and I had a lot of people request this letter. If you want a template letter that you can just plug your information into and send to your landlord or send to your bank. Almost all banks right now are giving some kind of deferment. A lot of banks I'm talking to are giving principal and interest deferment. Fire this off to your bank if you need help. Keep this in your tool belt. This COVID-19 crisis is not over, right? If you want to send it to your landlord, fire it off to your landlord. You can go get a copy of the letter. It's in Google Docs. And again, I'll send you this link at the end of the presentation. I want to talk about the tale of two practices. And I show you this to show you the power of understanding the numbers in your practice. If you take the average dentist, and these are averages based on benchmarking of 9,000 dental practices done in 2019 in the United States, all practices are doing at least 700,000, 650,000 a year, I think was the number on the benchmark. So there's no startup practices in this benchmark. The average dentist answered 70% of their phone calls during business hours. They appointed at the average percent. Patients attended those appointments at the average. The patients accepted treatment at the average. And then the average visit value was around $1,500 per patient. The average dentist, if you take all the averages and you put 100 new patients through their funnel, the average dentist got $19,500 of production collections out of 100 new patient opportunities. That's average. Now, I want to show you what we call the 5 A's dentist. And the power of the 5 A's, which is our money funnel teaching philosophy and concept, is that we're not trying to move mountains here. We need to move each number a meager 10%. Instead of answering 70% of the calls, what if we answer 80%? Instead of appointing at 55%, what if we appoint at 65%, right? Instead of patients attending at 80%, what if they attend at 90%? All these numbers are very, very achievable. All of them. We have practices that are answering 100% of their calls. Multiple practices answering 100% of their calls. We have 98% attendance rates, 80% appoint rates. So the power is in the strategies, and the data drives the strategy. And the difference is when you can increase each stage 10%, and then you can take your average visit value and bump it 20%. So we figure out, how are we going to get acceptance on $1,800 per patient per year instead of $1,500? Maybe there's some sealants. Maybe there's some mouth guard. Maybe there's, a small cavity that they didn't accept. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not looking at this from a clinical point of view. I'm looking at this from a numbers and a strategy point of view. When you can move these numbers a meager 10%, you can double your revenue out of your new patients. And if you can move the last two stages a little bit more, you can double and a half, right? 158%. This is the power of the 5A's. These are the metrics that you need to be looking at in your practice. There's a really tragic story that just happened that probably all of you are familiar with. We lost a basketball legend. We lost Kobe Bryant. Kobe died tragically a month or two ago in a helicopter crash. His pilot was flying through some fog, could not see where he was going. And 9 people on board that helicopter died that day. Kobe's pilot made the error of flying without a dashboard. If Kobe had had a dial or a gauge or a dashboard that showed him that there was a mountain in front of him, he would have responded to that data and made the necessary adjustments to pull up. But he didn't. He was flying blind. And if you're flying your practice blind and you don't have the same gauges and metrics, you too are going to crash into a mountain. And I don't want to see that happen to anybody. I was a huge Kobe fan. I loved seeing back in the day when him and Jordan and the All-Stars would line up, and that was amazing. He was an amazing person. He gave back to his community. You've got to have dashboards and dials and gauges in your practice. And these 5, the 5A's, answer, appoint, attend, accept, and average, are 5 of the critical things you need to be looking at. And to break this out a little bit further, we need to see accepted on both hygiene and restorative separately. And this is all data that if you're a client, we've got it in our practice HQ and within Dental Intel that we're syncing all this data together. And when you can let the data guide you, right? You can't take this to your front office staff and say, you need to answer 10% more of the calls. That doesn't work. If you've tried that before, your staff probably rebelled against you. They probably had a coup d'etat. But if you go to your staff and say, hey, we need to improve this, and here is the Batline handbook, so you can have the strategies, and I'm going to help you figure this thing out. We're going to go through this and figure out how are we going to answer 10% more of these calls. And then we've got the strategy, and you're supporting, right? You can't just take a challenge to your team without the support. That is why spreadsheet consulting always fails. Spreadsheet consulting, which is what I call what some consultants do when they just say, oh, just go do this, is all challenge with no support. We've got to support our people. You got to support your teams. And we do this through all the different tools. If you need to know how to answer and appoint, we've got a Batline handbook. If you need to know how to get appoint and attend, we've got our pre-appointment report. We focus on the dentist performance framework, and there's 5 major pieces that contribute to this. As a marketing agency at heart, which is what I started SmartBox as, attracting more and better patients was the very first thing we did. But it's also about how do we increase patient value? How do we retain them for life? How are we going to grow profits? And then how are we also going to build a motivated and productive team? How am I going to build accountability within the team? Out of these 5, I would encourage you to do this. Pick 1, pick 2, but don't pick more. Pick 1 or 2 that you really want to focus on when you reopen. Figure out, prioritize. What are you already doing great? Maybe you've got a great team. Maybe you've got great systems in your practice already. Maybe you've got great patients. Pick one of these and then start developing the strategies to move the needle so that your gauges reflect the change that you're making. If you don't make the change, you're not going to see, if Kobe's pilot had pulled back on the stick, the gauge would have read differently. But instead, he didn't have a gauge, and he was just flying around blind. And that works if you can see. But right now, we're all walking through a very foggy area, and we're going to be coming out of this. When we can focus on one or two areas, it builds an immense amount of power, right? I'm not going to talk about this in depth because I'm going to give you all of this information in our 10 Steps to Thrive. How to build your own team-driven practice. How to use Zoom and Uber right now to remotely level up your team. We're going to give you the Success Academy workbook. New for this week, this is new. If you've been on here in past weeks, you don't have this. Our Success Academy workbook, we've split apart. There's now a doctor workbook and a team workbook. You can go download it here at 10stepstothrive.com. We're also going to give you our money funnel evaluation and report. This is one of the first things you probably want to do is figure out where you're at. Get your team involved on the evaluation. Get their input and feedback. Remember, a 10% increase across each of the 5 A's will double the money that's coming from your new patients. Now we need the strategies. What are the strategies that are going to allow us an incremental 10% increase? And that's where all these resources are going to come in, and they're going to support you as you go through this journey. The most important thing is that you have gauges. You have a dashboard. If you are a client of ours, you know that we've got our Practice HQ where we're benchmarking your practice. We're syncing with Dental Intel to make sure you know what's going on, that you're not flying blind. Most cash crunches in dental practices are foreseeable. They're always foreseeable. And they're always foreseeable before the cash crunch occurs. Kobe's pilot, if he had had a gauge or a dial that gave him elevation or a topographical map, that mountain would have been foreseeable. But it wasn't foreseeable because he was flying blind. What these give you is the ability to fly and know how you're flying before that ride starts to get bumpy. I don't mean to, I certainly don't have any intention. I love Kobe. And I had somebody say once, man, you're trying to like make this out to be the punchline in your story. And I'm not. What I am trying to do is to emphasize the importance of having dials in your practice. Money funnel calculator. You can plug in, if you're a dentist, we've got our marketing maximizer calculator. You plug all your marketing in and it tells you how you're performing. If you're an orthodontist, we've got our ortho patient life cycle. Orthodontists are a little bit easier than dentists. You just have less dials to look at. You have less things going on. You don't have recalls and, generally a lot of the things that dentists have to deal with, the complexities of a dental practice. Orthodontists are streamlined. It's a more simple business model. So we've developed this for both. If you want the 5 A's for dentists, get this. If you want the 5 A's for orthodontists, get this. You can get both at this link here. It's not too late to make the same profit this year as you did last year. I'll tell you, you're 6 weeks in right now. The dentists that were on top of this 6 weeks ago, planning their expenses, figuring out how they're going to prop up lost revenue, are now 6 weeks ahead of you. If you've been working on this for 6 weeks, kudos to you. You are working to avoid the hurricane. But I will say, I've done some budgets in the last week, that it is still possible with some of the scenarios we've seen to come close to making the same money you did this year as you did last year. It's going to take more work now than it did 6 weeks ago. It's going to take a lot more work if you wait another 6 weeks, right? The 5 A's play into this an immense amount. This particular example we did about 5 weeks ago. It was a $1.3 million practice. The doctor took home a little bit shy of 600. And in the COVID-19 budget scenario, he was taking home about 560. And if you do the work, you will understand your assumptions to make, you're going to have to grow your collections 15 to 20% for 16 to 20 weeks in order to overcome the shutdown, right? Virtual smile assessment. We've been pushing this. If you're a client, we'll give it to you. If you're not a client, we'll give you the strategy guide. But if you're not a client, we can't give you our technology. So we can give you the strategy guide and show you a little bit more about it. Step 8, Patient rescheduling strategies. We released this last week. What is a pre-appointment worth in your practice? What is phantom demand? What effect do pre-appointments and phantom demand have on your money funnel? How do you know if you're leaving $17,000 to $34,000 on the table every month because of your pre-appointment strategies? We've analyzed the data around pre-appointing your patients. And I've given you, in this report, I'm going to give you a 4-question, 60-second evaluation so that you can evaluate if this is a problem in your practice. And you'll be able to tell after this. And then if it is, 2 must-haves to fix it. I've been getting this question a lot. Should I increase or decrease my fees? The short answer is you should never decrease your fees. The other short answer is you should always increase your fees. And the reason is, let's take a typical practice that has, let's say, a 45% doctor take home, 45% profit margin. If you decide that you need to cut your prices, your fees 10%, and you have a 45% profit margin, that means you need to do 23% more work. You need to collect 23% more to make the same money. And that's why the short answer is no, you should not discount your fees. Let me give you the other side of the scenario. If you have a 45% profit margin and you raise your fees 10%, right? Now you can do 18% less work and still make the same money. You can see almost 20% less patients if you raise your fees 10% and still make the exact same money. And the reality is, if you raise your fees 10%, you're not going to lose 20% of your patients. You might lose 5 or 10% of your patients, which means you raise your fees, you do less work, and you make more money. So I'm going to give you our fee calculator, 10stepstothrive.com. You can pop out there and get this. If you're a current client, you already know all this stuff. We got a 6-step playbook that we're going to slingshot you guys back on this. We're also rolling out our A-player hiring system because there's going to be a lot of hiring to be done, and our 6 steps to insurance independence, because insurability rates are going to go down with unemployment going up. And how do you navigate a fee-for-service environment to make sure that you're shoring up whatever area of your practice you need to shore up? If you've got dental intel already, we can hook you up with local med for free. If you got local med, we can hook you up with dental intel for free. Success Academy, we're giving away, if you're not a client yet, let me tell you about what we're doing. A very similar philosophy, but we're offering the same strategies because this is what is going to slingshot you out of this. You're going to need to rehire people. A players are going to be abundant in a few weeks when you start opening, and hiring the right people is critical. So we're rolling out our A player hiring system. We're also rolling out our insurance independent system. We also want to we have a limited number of slots for development right now available. We're having a huge surge of intake of new clients right now. What we're offering to new clients, future clients, is that if you want to go ahead and get your development on your marketing started, we'll go ahead and do that. So if you have interest in learning more about that, shoot me an email. You've got my email address. I've sent you 100 emails probably over the past 4 weeks. Shoot me an email and I can tell you more about what that's like. But we're willing to help all of you guys, current clients and future clients, through this thing. And we're all in the same boat together.